The wind howled across the dry alien plains, carrying sand and ash like whispers of the war that had just passed in the middle of the broken road. Near the edge of a ruined village lay a small figure, half buried in the dust. She looked like a child no older than 6 or 7. Her skin was pale violet, her clothes torn and covered in dirt. She didn't move, not even when footsteps passed close to her. People just walked by, pretending not to see. Grant was just another traveler, a human moving supplies from one side of the colony to the other. He wasn't a hero, not a soldier anymore. He just wanted peace. But when he saw the girl lying there, something deep inside his chest pulled tight. He stopped, staring at her. Her eyes opened just slightly, and they were wide, glowing, and full of fear. No one else even turned to look. Grant crouched beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "you okay?" The girl didn't answer. She just clutched something in her hand, small. Broken necklace, a locket, maybe, with dust covering the front. Her fingers were shaking, but she refused to let go of it. Grant looked around, hoping someone would claim her, a parent, a guardian, even a local official. But the crowd kept moving, avoiding eye contact. He picked her up slowly, careful not to scare her. She was light as a feather and cold, too cold. He wrapped her in his jacket and carried her back to his land hauler. Parked just outside the ruined market, inside, it was warmer. The girl didn't speak, but she watched him closely as he prepared a heat pack and placed it near her. He offered her some protein crackers and a water tube. At first, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she reached out and took them. Her hands trembled as she ate. But her eyes never left his face. "What's your name?" he asked. No answer. He tried again, slower, using the few alien words he'd picked up over the years. Still nothing. But when she finished eating, she crawled closer to him, holding out the broken locket. Grant took it carefully and wiped the dust off the surface. Inside, there was a photo, 2 figures. One adult, one child, both smiling. He looked at the girl, then back at the picture. "This, your mom?" he asked. The girl nodded once. Then, in a whisper so quiet, he barely heard it, she said, "Luma." Her voice cracked, like it hadn't been used in days. Grant repeated the name slowly. "Luma." She gave a small nod, then leaned against his side and closed her eyes. He stayed still, not wanting to break the moment. But his mind was racing. Who would leave a child alone like that? Why did no one care? Something wasn't right. And the way people avoided her, like they were scared of her, made him even more uneasy. Later that night, as the wind outside howled louder, Luma began to speak in her sleep. The words were strange, in a dialect Grant didn't understand, but she repeated one name again and again. Kalira. Sometimes her voice shook like she was begging, other times like she was warning someone. He wrote the name down, hoping it meant something the next morning. He took her to the town's small med station. The doctor scanned her, but found no major injuries, just dehydration and exhaustion. When Grant asked about finding her parents, the doctor glanced at the child and frowned. Some kids were taken during the raids, he said softly. Some were sold. Grant felt his stomach turn. "Sewed," he repeated. The doctor nodded. "Happens more than we like to admit." He looked at Luma again, sitting on the table, her eyes following him like he was the only safe thing in the world. Grant made a choice then, a quiet one in his heart, until he found her real family. She would stay with him, safe, fed, and warm. As they walked back through the dusty village, people stared, not at him, but at the girl. Some looked with pity, others with fear. Luma held Grant's hand tighter. He didn't pull away that night. Luma sat by the wall and began drawing with a piece of broken chalk. Strange symbols, circles, and marks that made no sense to him. But she drew them with purpose, like she remembered something important. Grant watched her, trying to make sense of it all. Then she stopped, pointed to one of the symbols, and said one word: home. Asterisk. The locket glowed faintly under the moonlight. Grant turned it in his hand again and again, wondering if it held more secrets than just a photo. Luma was asleep, curled tightly in the corner of his hauler. But even in her sleep, she held the locket close like it was the last piece of her soul. Suddenly, the lights in the hauler flickered. A soft hum vibrated through the floor, followed by a sharp beeping sound. The radar system was picking something up. Grant leaned forward and tapped the screen. A cloaked figure was moving outside. Slow and steady, watching his hauler from a distance, he grabbed his old blaster and stepped out. But there was no one there, only silence and a strange chill in the air. When he came back inside, Luma was sitting up, wide awake, eyes glowing with fear. She pointed to the radar screen and whispered a word that made his spine freeze. Hunter's. Grant didn't ask how she knew. He sat down beside her, placed a calming hand on her shoulder, and asked softly, "Who are they hunting, Luma?" She didn't speak, but she looked at the locket, then at herself, and then at him. The next day, Grant took her to the market to find supplies. He kept her close, wrapped in a shawl, hoping to avoid attention, but one of the merchants noticed her eyes. "You shouldn't bring that kind of child here," the man hissed. "She's marked." Grant narrowed his eyes. Marked by who? The merchant didn't answer, just pointed at the chalk symbols on Luma's hand. "They're forbidden," he said. "Only the old blood used those." Before the purge, later that night, Grant brought out a data slate and showed Luma several pictures of alien scripts. She pointed quickly to one Setan old language, barely used now. Grant searched it deeper, and that's when he found it. The word she had whispered in her sleep, Kalira. It wasn't just a name. It was the title of a royal protector from the Tulkari people, a warrior mother from a bloodline long thought extinct. Luma sat quietly while Grant read it aloud. Then she nodded, and for the first time, she said a full sentence. "She is not dead." Grant looked at her in shock. "Who?" Luma pointed to the locket. "My mother." The next morning, strange things began happening. A drone followed them to the food center, but disappeared before anyone could trace it. A scarred alien woman tried to take Luma by force in a quiet alley. Grant punched her hard enough to knock her into the wall. But before she vanished into the crowd, she whispered something chilling. "She's worth a kingdom," back in the hauler. Grant locked the doors and pulled down the blinds. He knew now this wasn't just a lost child. Luma was being hunted for a reason, and that locket was more than just memory. It was proof of something powerful. He scanned the locket again, and this time, something triggered. A hidden chip opened, revealing a small hologram. It showed a woman with the same eyes as Luma, standing proudly in armor with a symbol glowing on her chest. She said one word before the image cut out: Kalira. Grant stared at the empty air, then turned to Luma. "Is this your mother?" She nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. "She gave me away," she whispered, "to save me." The pieces were falling into place now. Luma was the daughter of a powerful woman, maybe the last royal of a fallen house. And someone wanted to erase all trace of that bloodline. Grant wasn't sure who. But they were coming. He made a decision. He would protect her no matter what. But first, he needed answers. He opened a secure channel and called an old contact, a half-retired information broker on the edge of the outer ring. "Find someone," Grant said. "A woman named Kalira." The voice on the other end went silent. Then came a slow, careful reply. "Are you insane, Grant?" "She's wanted across 3 systems." Grant clenched his jaw. "I don't care," he said. "Tell me where she is." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "Well," the broker said, You won't have to look far. She's already looking for you. Grant's eyes narrowed. Outside the hauler, the wind picked up, and in the distance, something moved at the edge of the horizon. Not fast, but steady. Someone was coming, and Luma. She just sat quietly and whispered the word. Again, Mother. The alarm on Grant's hauler never failed before, but tonight it triggered 3 times, and each time nothing was there. No animal, no movement, just silence and wind, until the 4th time, when something or someone stood motionless at the far end of the compound gate. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in a long, dark cloak. The hood pulled low. The scanners tried to identify her, but failed. Unknown life signature. The screen blinked again and again. Grant grabbed his blaster, nodded to Luma, who stayed hidden in the back with a blanket over her. He stepped outside, boots crunching over the cracked stone. The wind blew hard, stinging his eyes, but the figure stood still. When he got close enough, she spoke one word. Luma. Grant raised the blaster. Who are you? She didn't answer, but slowly pulled back her hood. Her face was not fully human, but not fully alien either. Skin like shimmering bronze, high cheekbones, sharp silver eyes that seemed too tired for someone so young. And across her right cheek a long scar, marked in the same old language Luma had drawn on the walls. Did you find her? The woman asked, voice low. Grant didn't reply right away. The truth weighed heavy in his chest. Who are you to her? He asked finally. The woman's shoulders dropped, her voice cracked. I'm her mother, inside the hauler. Luma had crept forward and was watching from the small window. Her breath caught when she saw the woman, but instead of joy, her eyes filled with fear. She pulled the blanket tighter and backed away. No, she whispered. No, she left me. Grant turned slowly toward the hauler and stepped back, placing himself between the door and the woman. She doesn't seem happy to see you, he said coldly. The woman didn't argue. She looked down at the ground. Silent for a long time, I made a choice, she said at last, a terrible one. She pulled out a small, round stone and placed it in Grant's hand. It lit up with the same glowing symbols Luma had drawn before. She was going to be taken, the woman whispered, by people who wanted to use her. Because of me, I let them take me instead, but she ran. Grant watched her carefully, not sure if he believed her yet. You're Kalira, he said finally. Her eyes lifted and locked with his, so she remembered, she said softly. Then there's still hope. Suddenly her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground. Grant rushed to her side and caught her before she hit the dirt. Her body was burning hot with fever, and her side was bleeding under the cloak. A deep plasma wound, days old and untreated. Back inside the hauler, Grant laid her on the medical bench and started working. Luma stood frozen in the corner. Hugging the blanket tightly, Grant looked at her and said gently, She's hurt, Luma. Bad. She came a long way just to find you. Luma didn't move, but her eyes never left the woman's face. Kalira stirred, barely conscious, her lips dry and cracked. She reached out weakly, fingers brushing the edge of the blanket. I never stopped looking, she whispered, my little star. Tears welled up in Luma's eyes, but she didn't step closer. She just turned and hid in the corner, whispering words Grant couldn't understand. That night, Grant stayed awake. Sitting between the two of them, he watched Kalira's breathing rise and fall. Listened to Luma's soft cries in the dark. He had seen battlefields, lost friends, fought monsters. But this quiet pain was something deeper, something harder to fix. The next morning, Kalira opened her eyes, stronger now. Her voice was clearer. I need your help, she said to Grant. They're coming, not for me, but for her. Grant nodded slowly, already expecting it. Why? He asked. Kalira looked toward Luma, who still hadn't spoken a word to her. Because she carries my blood, she said. And my blood unlocks something they all want. She pulled out the glowing ringstone again and placed it next to the locket. Together, they lit up like a map. Drawing lines and coordinates in the air, it wasn't just family, it was legacy. And someone out there wanted to erase it forever. Luma stepped forward slowly, eyes wide as the symbols danced in front of her. Her hand reached toward them on its own. When she touched the light, the symbols shifted and formed a shape, a door glowing in gold, and above it, the symbols she'd drawn on Grant's wall. Grant stood up and looked between them. "What is that?" he asked. Kylira's voice was barely a whisper. "It's where everything began," and outside, far in the dust-covered sky, 3 silent ships dropped out of orbit, headed straight for them. The ships didn't make noise when they landed. They just appeared 3 dark shadows settling into the dust like vultures around a dying animal. No sirens, no lights, only silence, but Luma woke up screaming. Before anyone told her they had come, Grant jumped from the floor, his hand already on his blaster. Kylira sat up too fast, her wound reopening, but she didn't care. "They've found us," she whispered, eyes sharp again, despite the fever. She looked at Luma, and her voice dropped low. "They're not here to take me. They want her." Luma backed into the corner, shaking her head. "No," she whispered, "not again." Grant crouched beside her, trying to calm her. "Tell me who they are, Luma," he asked softly. "Please." Kylira stood, grabbing her blade from the wall. "They're called the Veilborn," she said. "They erase bloodlines, not just people. They want to wipe out my legacy, and my daughter is the last of it." Grant had heard the name once, years ago, in a dying soldier's final breath. "Veilborn walk in shadows," the man had said, "and leave nothing behind." Luma stepped forward, holding out the locket. "It's my fault," she said quietly. "I ran away, but I still had the key." Grant looked down at the small, glowing item. It was pulsing now, almost like it was alive. It wasn't just a memory locket, it was a beacon. Kylira's face fell. "They tracked her by this," she said, grabbing the locket gently. Then she looked at Grant. "I lied to you," she said slowly. Grant's jaw clenched, but he waited. "I didn't sell her to protect the village," Kylira said, her voice cracking. "I gave her away to a human trader." Grant's heart dropped. "To me?" he asked. Kylira shook her head. "No. But someone like you, someone who worked for the old Federation. I thought humans could hide her better than I ever could." But something went wrong. Luma looked between them, tears falling. "You gave me away," she said. "You let them take me." Kylira stepped toward her. "Tet, you weren't there when I cried," she whispered. "You weren't there when I was locked in that cage." Grant stood between them, his voice firm. "Now's not the time for blame," he said. "They're almost here." The radar showed movements, small, fast, and coordinated. 5 figures, maybe more, creeping across the ridgeline toward their shelter. Kylira wiped her face quickly, the warrior returning in her expression. "If they breach this place, they'll take her and wipe her memories," she said. "She won't even remember who she is." Grant looked at the old generator in the corner and made a decision. "We can't outrun them, not with your injuries," he said, "but I can trap them." He ran outside and began setting explosives around the entry path, using his old military training. Kylira followed slowly, helping where she could, inside. Luma stared at the glowing locket and whispered to herself. Then she opened it, pressed her finger deep into the back panel, and the device opened a second time. Inside was a shard, thin and silver, glowing with a faint hum. She touched it, and her eyes went wide, in her mind. Memories exploded, flashes of her mother before the war, before the fear, warm hands, laughter. Stories under stars, Kylira holding her high and saying, "You are the key." Tears filled her eyes again, but they weren't sad this time. They were memories of love, buried under pain. She stepped outside, holding the shard, the moment Kylira saw it. She dropped to her knees. "You found it," she whispered. The core Grant turned. "What is it?" Kalira looked at him, a strange pride in her eyes. "It's her birthright," she said, "and also her curse. It opens the door of stars, an ancient gate to a power the Veilborn want to control." Suddenly, a shot rang out, blasting the edge of the wall. The Veilborn were here. Wearing dark armor that shimmered like smoke, they moved without sound, without hesitation. Grant raised his weapon and shouted, "Luma, stay behind me." But Luma didn't hide. She stepped forward, holding the shard high, and shouted in a voice louder than Grant had ever heard, "Enough!" The sky above them rippled like something ancient had stirred. The Veilborn paused. Just for a moment, it was enough. Kalira struck the first. Grant shot the second. The trap detonated, throwing dust and fire into the air. When it was over, 3 Veilborn lay still. 2 fled into the dark. Luma stood in the center. Glowing faintly, her voice soft now. "They'll come again," she said. "But now, I remember who I am." The wanted poster didn't show her face. It only showed the symbol, the mark of Kalira's bloodline glowing red. And under it, bold alien letters translated into one word: Bounty. Alive, triple, if delivered quietly. Grant stared at the screen in the underground trader's den. The message wasn't hidden. It was broadcast on 5 systems, and anyone carrying that symbol, even a child, was worth a fortune. "See?" the trader said nervously, pulling his hand back from the screen. "They don't care if she's just a girl. They want the bloodline erased." Grant didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out, fists clenched the moment he stepped. Back into the hauler, Kalira knew something was wrong. She stood, steady now, her wound stitched and healing, but her eyes were heavy. "They've put a price on her, haven't they?" she asked. Grant nodded once. "And you?" he added quietly. "They want you to." Kalira looked at Luma, who was sitting near the wall, drawing symbols again. She smiled softly. They always did. Grant began packing quickly. "We can't stay here," he said. "We need to move before someone decides to collect." But Kalira stepped in his path. "There's nowhere we can go that they won't follow," she said. "Unless—" Grant paused. "Unless what?" Kalira hesitated, then opened a secret compartment in her belt and pulled out a shard of crystal knot, like the one Luma carried. This one was black and cold. "A lock," she whispered, "to a vault buried under the ruins of Karseth. It contains records proof of what they did to my people, and the coordinates to a place even the Veilborn can't reach." Grant stared at her. "You've had this the whole time." Kalira looked down, guilt on her face. "I didn't know if I could trust you," she said. "Until you protected her like she was your own." Before Grant could answer, a loud crash shook the hauler. A group of locals had surrounded them. Not soldiers, not the Veilborn, just poor villagers, sighs filled with desperation and greed. "Give us the girl," one shouted. "We saw the bounty." Kalira moved to draw her blade, but Grant stopped her. He stepped outside alone, hands raised. "She's just a child," he said. "What you're doing, this isn't justice." One of the men sneered. "This isn't justice. Human," he spat. "It's survival." Just then, the ground beneath them rumbled. A soft glow appeared from under the hauler. Luma was walking out. The shard in her hand pulsed brightly, sending waves through the air. The villagers froze, their faces filled with fear. Some dropped their weapons and ran. Others fell to their knees. Eyes wide, "She carries the key," one of them whispered, "the child of the stars." Luma didn't speak, but she held Grant's hand tightly. He looked down and realized she wasn't scared. She was ready. That night, they traveled in silence. Across the salt flats, Kalira guided them, using the dark shard, leading them away from the trade routes and toward the ruins of Karseth. Grant stayed alert, watching the skies. They had survived one ambush, but there would be more, as they camped near an old wreck. Kalira finally asked the question she had been avoiding. "Why are you doing this, Grant?" "You could have walked away the first day." He stared at the small fire, the reflection dancing in his tired eyes. "Because no one else did," he said. "I've seen people look the other way too many times." "Not this time," Kalira watched him for a long moment, then whispered, "You're more than I expected." A soft giggle interrupted them. Luma was watching from her blanket. "I told you he's nice," she said, smiling for the first time in days. That night, while they slept, a lone bounty hunter arrived at the ruins. He wore black armor and moved like smoke. He didn't come to speak, didn't come to warn. He came to kill quietly and take the girl. But Grant wasn't sleeping. He saw the shadow before it moved, and this time he didn't hesitate. The blaster fired once. The bounty hunter dropped, and in the distance, 3 more ships turned away. A silent signal had been sent. This girl is protected by someone who doesn't back down. The old vault was not supposed to breathe, but it did, as soon as Luma stepped. Near the buried ruins of Karseth, the broken stones shifted, releasing a long breath of stale air from deep below. A wind that hadn't moved in centuries began to stir, carrying whispers only she could hear. Kalira fell to her knees, touching the sand. "This is where it all began," she said, "and where they wanted us to end." Grant looked around the wasteland, hand near his blaster. There were no signs of ships or drones, but he didn't relax. "If this place holds what they fear," he said, "then they'll come to destroy it." Kalira nodded. "That's why we need to get in before they do." Luma stepped forward with the silver shard glowing in her hand. The ruins responded, lighting up with ancient symbols, one by one. With a soft pulse, a hidden door slid open in the ground, revealing a tunnel of smooth black stone, untouched by time. But Grant didn't move. He had spotted something, a blinking red light on the ridge. Far above them, a watcher drone, small and almost invisible. Someone had seen the door open. "We're out of time," Grant said. "They'll be here in less than an hour." Inside the vault, the air was heavy but clear. Walls lined with glowing crystals told stories of the past Kalira's people, their fall, their secrets, and in the center of the chamber, a terminal, ancient and locked by blood code. Kalira approached it and placed her hand on the stone. It lit up, recognizing her, but it didn't open. "It needs to," she said, turning to Luma. "The bloodline isn't complete without you, Luma." Hesitated, scared, but Grant gently touched her shoulder. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. "Not with us." She stepped beside her mother, their hands meeting on the surface. The vault opened with a deep hum, revealing a crystalline disk full of data, history, and maps leading to a sanctuary world. A place the Veilborn couldn't reach. It was hope. But just then an explosion rocked the earth above. Dust rained from the ceiling as Kalira shouted, "They've started bombing the surface." Grant cursed under his breath. "We can't leave through the front. They'll have it surrounded." He scanned the vault with his portable radar, looking for another way out. There beneath the west wall was a sealed passage, blocked but not destroyed. "We dig," he said. Already pulling tools from his pack, they worked fast. Breaking through rubble and ancient stone, the ground above shook again, closer this time. Luma cried out as part of the ceiling cracked, nearly hitting her. Grant grabbed her and shielded her with his body. "We're almost there," he whispered, heart pounding. Kalira moved like a storm-wounded but unstoppable. She tore through the last of the stone, revealing an old maintenance tunnel, dark and narrow. "I used this as a girl to sneak out," she said. "It leads to the canyon outside the scanners." They crawled through the tunnel one by one. Behind them, the vault began to collapse, the ceiling falling in as if sealing itself forever. Grant carried Luma. Kalira limped behind, blood dripping from her side again. They burst out into the night air, lungs gasping behind them. The vault entrance caved in completely. The Veilborn wouldn't get the disc knot this time. They didn't stop. They kept moving, traveling through the night across the red canyons, until they reached a hidden outpost and old rebel station long abandoned. Grant activated the solar panels and turned on emergency power. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Inside, Luma sat on a crate, still holding the crystal shard. Her face was calm, not afraid anymore. "I saw them in the vault," she said suddenly. "Not just the past-future paths, too." Kalira looked at her sharply. "What did you see?" Luma hesitated, then pointed at Grant. "You," she whispered, standing beside us. But not as a stranger, as family. Grant froze, unsure what to say, but Kalira stepped forward. Her voice soft but clear. "She's right." She said, "You didn't just save her, you've become part of her future, outside." The desert stars shimmered in silence for the first time in days. No one was chasing them. No alarms, no attacks, no fear. Only 3 souls sitting in the dark, planning what came next together. The stars above the canyon blinked like slow tears. It was the first quiet night since everything began. No ships in the sky, no sirens, no footsteps in the dirt. But something else stirred, something heavier than danger. Luma had fallen asleep, curled beside an old supply crate. Her small hand still wrapped around the glowing shard. Her breathing was soft now, peaceful for once. Grant watched her from across the room, still gripping his blaster out of habit. Kalira sat nearby, legs folded beneath her, eyes locked on the silent fire. But she wasn't watching the flames, she was watching him. "You're not sleeping," she said quietly. "Neither are you," he replied, without looking away. There was a long pause between them, the kind that carried meaning without words. Then Kalira spoke again, this time softer. "You could have left," she said. "At any moment, you could have walked away." Grant sighed, staring into the fire. "Yeah," he said, "but I didn't, because someone had to stay." Kalira stood slowly, walking to where Luma slept. She placed a gentle kiss on the girl's forehead, then turned back to Grant. "I've been hunted for so long. I forgot what it felt like to breathe," she said. "You gave that back too." U.S. Grant looked up at her, eyes tired but steady. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said. "I did it because she looked at me like I mattered, and maybe I wanted to matter again." Kalira took a deep breath, then pulled something from around her neck. It was a different kind of ring, not metal, made of woven crystal and glowing fibers. It shimmered gently in the dark. "In my culture," she began, "this is how we ask." Her voice trembled for the first time. "We don't kneel," she said, stepping forward. "We stand as equals, and we offer the ring not to claim, but to trust." Grant's eyes widened. He didn't move, didn't blink, he didn't need to. Kalira held the ring out, her hand steady. "Grant," she said softly, "you didn't just save us, you became part of us. And if you'll have us, you can stay." Behind her, Luma stirred and opened her eyes. She saw the ring in her mother's hand and the man standing frozen in front of her. Then she smiled the way only children do, pure, wide, and full of light. "Papa." She whispered. Grant blinked fast, then stepped forward. He didn't take the ring right away. He took their hands, Kalira's in one, Luma's in the other, and only then did he speak. "I don't know much about alien rings or ceremonies," he said, "but I know what family feels like, and I'd be a fool to walk away from it again." Kalira placed the glowing ring around his wrist. It formed a perfect fit, almost like it had waited just for him. The fire pulsed once, brighter than before, some ancient magic recognizing a bond stronger than blood, stronger than fear, stronger than war. Outside the shelter, the stars shifted slightly. The map Luma had seen in the vault, her vision of the future, was beginning to form. They weren't just running anymore. They were going somewhere new. A sanctuary world waited, hidden beyond Veilborn reach. But this time, they wouldn't arrive as fugitives. They would arrive as a family. Kalira, warrior and mother. Luma, child of stars and key to a lost legacy. And Grant, the human who could, stayed silent, but chose instead to stay as they stepped outside under the rising sun. Kalira leaned close and whispered, "From now on, we face everything together." Grant smiled, wrapping an arm around her waist and lifting Luma up into the air. "Together sounds just right," he said, and the canyon echoed with something rare in a broken galaxy laughter.